Hello and welcome to this morning's webinar, Tomorrow's Bathrooms, brought to you by RIBA Journal in partnership with Ideal Standard. My name is Isabelle Priest and I'm acting managing editor at RIBA Journal, and I'm chairing today's discussion and presentation. We're actually broadcasting live to you from the Ideal Standard's new Design and Specification Centre in Clerkenwell, London. The showroom is home to the Atelier Collection, designed by Roberto Palomba, who I will be interviewing later. It's the first event we've managed to do, at least in part on location, for a long time, and it's good to be here with some of the items that we'll be speaking about this morning. Hopefully you will catch a few glimpses in the background. It's the new showroom, and it's in the former studios of Alexander McQueen's studios, and it will be opening for the first time on the 1st of June. So welcome to everyone who's tuned in today. I understand we had nearly 400 registrations for this morning's event, which just shows what a thing bathroom design has become. There'll be more discussion on that later. Hello also to our speakers. We have a thorough lineup of presentations and panelists. So to run through today's agenda, the program should last around 1 hour and 15 minutes, taking you to around 11:15 this morning when I will wrap up. So to start off, we have a presentation by artist, designer and author Nathaniel Furman, who will be speaking to you about the use of colour, a more general presentation about how and why colour has made a return in a big way into all design, and touching on how it affects bathroom design. He'll be presenting part of his research at the Architectural Association, and I'm sure some tips on how he likes to use it. That will be followed by an interview with Roberto Palomba, Chief Design Officer of the Atelier Collection at Ideal Standard, about this partnership and what inspired the new ranges. Roberto has his own design studio Roberto Serafini Associati, and has designed everything from lighting and furniture to private homes. Then there will be a short presentation presenting the collection. After that, we will be joined by other speakers for our panel discussion, including Russell Whitehead and Jonathan Pluro, co-founders of 2LG Studio, which is known for its fun and quirky interior design, and which is certainly making the most of the resurgence in colour and pattern which we are seeing by so many up-and-coming young designers. They've also just finished writing a book called Making Living Lovely with Thames and Hudson, which partly questions whether the bold new interiors look that derives from social media. Then we will also be joined by Niccolo Stesano, founder of Stesano's Studio, a London-based architectural practice that specializes in high-end residential schemes, often within listed buildings, and whose work is based on more classical materials and principles, and whose clients expect and want something maybe a bit different. And then finally by Andrew Stembridge, who is a hotelier by trade, but whose job title is design advisor to the iconic Luxury Hotels Group. The company has hotels all over the world, including on the Lido beachfront in Venice and at Cliveden House. He'll be speaking about some of his latest schemes and how he specifies for them. Adam and Roberto will rejoin us for this part of the event too. You can click on the links in the delegates packs to find out more about the individuals involved and to see their work. But essentially, we have a range of people who are designing products, one-off individual bathrooms for private homes, to people who are used to thinking about and specifying bathrooms en masse, at scale, in a more commercially and practically sensitive context. So we are inviting questions to the speakers and panelists, and we will put these throughout the event after Adam's presentation, but also during the panel discussion. Please submit yours via the chat feature that you should see on the side. As mentioned before, Bathrooms have rapidly developed in design terms over the past 5 years. And I think for many architects and even homeowners, it's made the whole process of specifying and designing bathrooms even more complex, as if specifying all the right parts for an individual wash basin wasn't complicated enough. Now you are presented with all kinds of choice and decisions. Which colors should I use? What kind of textures? What should one prioritize? Our panelists will hopefully be able to demystify some of the thinking that goes into the alluring images that populate our social media feeds. So as I mentioned, bathrooms have kind of come a long way. And so it's worth just saying a few words first about where we're at with bathrooms. The history of bathrooms is actually very complex and has far more elements feeding into it than is possible for the time we have available. My particular expertise is around international modernism, hygiene, cleaning, and cleaners. Le Corbusier's Villa Savoie wash basin in the hall, for example. Bathroom history is wrapped up in the development of potteries and ceramics and modern manufacturing, but also in Victorian ingenuity, in designing infrastructure and urbanized sanitation, whereby the smallest rooms in our houses, or initially perhaps backyards, could plug into one of the biggest systems we designed, almost invisibly at the point of use. All kinds of factors have been at play over the years, including the fight against diseases like TB at the turn of the last century, as well as the machine for living in. People have gone from sharing latrines to having a bathroom in their own homes. And now there has been a proliferation. Many people want several and can't imagine a master bedroom without an ensuite. In 1952, the British census, 53% of homes in Britain had baths, but bathrooms became a popular measure for success, and post-war, manufacturers could barely keep up with demand. In France, for example, they invented fixtures like the Polybon and a kind of all-in-one cleansing station with a basin, bath, shower, bidet, and laundry tub. I feel fortunate that I haven't had to use one for a long time. Post-Second World War, however, bathrooms have made a steady climb to be more and more associated with luxury, with the carpeted bathroom walls of the 1970s, for instance, and became a space to relax and unwind, transformed in part by central heating and a desire to linger for longer, a place for leisure, regeneration, and sociality. The bathroom has lost its modernist clinical associations and become a room, and designed as such, personalized down to the color of the toilet paper. The pink variety was introduced in 1957. Now, well-being is increasingly involved with the integration of spa facilities and hotel levels of comfort and design into the home, and vice versa, as well as association with nature and its benefits that brings. Our rainfall showers are just an example. Of course, some of these luxuries aren't available to all and aren't reaching many populations throughout the world, and there is a growing focus on minimizing water use and sustainability. Over the past year, there has also been a renewed importance in cleanliness because of COVID. The bathroom has been at the forefront of that in people's homes, as is sanitary ware and cloakroom facilities in public spaces that are driving touch-free technologies, but also shower and rimless toilets. But we're here to talk about what's influencing bathrooms now and will tomorrow. And on that note, let me introduce you to our first speaker, Adam Nathaniel Furman. He's currently writing his second book for RIBA Publishing after his first book, Revisiting Postmodernism, and he's previously worked at OMA in Rotterdam, Ash Sakula, and Farrell's, and he's here to speak to you about the use of colour. Hello, Adam.
Hello, hi. Rather than, I guess, after a conversation with Isabelle, rather than sort of focusing on bathrooms, it's sort of a more general discussion about my relationship with colour, so it's quite personal. If that's okay, I will share screen now. Oh, hang on 1 second. Is that visible?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to time myself. So, pretty pigments, and I use the word pretty in a sort of polemical manner here. For all you Italians, we have some in the speaker group. I'm going to refer to sozzas quite a lot here, but you don't save your soul just painting everything white. I think this is one of the best covers of Icon magazines that I've ever come across. It's a direct quote from the great Ettore Sozzas. And the meaning of that is quite powerful for me, because I think color is something which it's very potent, it's very powerful. And for a lot of people, you grow up from a young age using it with abandon and with great joy. It's very much a present part of everyone's life. But as you get older, there's a tendency in the design world, and also in culture in general, to refer to color's exuberant and pleasurable and sensuous use in what would be normally traditionally termed as gendered language. So thought of as makeup, decoration, superficial excess, things which are not necessary or supplementary to the deep nature of what's going on underneath, which is something that I think there are many designers nowadays who are very much rejecting. This is an extract from The Eloquence of Color by Jacqueline Lichtenstein, which is a fantastic tract that traces the origins of this way of seeing color as being antithetical to depth and seriousness throughout Western history. And she traces it all the way back to 2000 years ago with Cicero, and the arguments in kind of Roman philosophical discourse between the philosophers and the rhetoricians, and how rhetoric was seen as something which was very superficial, dangerous, overly eloquent, rather than philosophy, which was the deep and meaningful sort of substantial discussion of content and ideas. And this idea that, and somehow from that, this trope developed, unfortunately, that the more kind of serious, dour, kind of boring, colorless that you were in your language and your descriptions, the more serious and philosophical you were. Whereas the more eloquent you were and the more expressive you were of your ideas in a way that would appeal to the general public, the less serious you were, the less philosophical you were. And this is a direct intellectual dichotomy or opposition, which was separated and transferred to color and ideas. It's a kind of Platonic idea of two separate things, the seen and the unseen, which is more serious. And it's really unfortunate that this continues to this day, this idea that somehow it comes secondarily, it's supplementary. It's in many ways undermining of the serious undercurrents of a design, where, as Jacqueline Lichtenstein says here, color is the material, or rather of painting, the irreducible component of representation that escapes the hegemony of language. And what she means by that, and I guess I would transfer it to design, is that it's the thing that speaks most eloquently to the occupant and to the consumer or the person who is looking at the work. It is the most powerful visual way that we can convey emotions, feelings, and ideas in a way that's non-linguistic, without having to explain that it's something valuable. People understand color in the most sort of intimate and sensual manner, and it's something that goes all the way back through ancient cultures. We're living in a very unusual kind of historical blip nowadays, where color is generally seen as something additive or unusual to be used, or a fad that will come and go. Throughout history, color has been integral to religions, to ornament, to decoration, to interiors, and actually its absence was something that would be seen as very unusual. In fact, in Japanese culture, the color white, the absence of color, is symbolic of death, not in a negative way, but just the complete absence of the kind of colors of this world. And actually in Egypt, the word for color actually meant in ancient Egypt to be. To be was to actually have pigment. This is something that in architectural and design education is kind of inculcated into people from relatively early age. This is a sort of nice example of two churches which are both, there's lots of Italy here, which are both extremely important and very beautiful from a similar period, the Roman Baroque period of the late 17th century. One on the left is San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane by Borromini. On the right, Sant'Andrea by Bernini. Both absolute masterpieces of Roman Baroque. Architecture students, design students that I know tend to be taken to the one on the left, which is a symphony, a beautiful, exquisite, sophisticated symphony of mathematics, form, and geometry. But the one on the right, which is also incredibly sophisticated, but which is a sensual overdose of color, effect, light, materials, and sensuality, as well as geometry, tends to only be visited when, if you're there, it tends to be visited by groups of 7-year-old or 8-year-old students, rather than the sort of adoring legions of architecture students from Spain and Britain and Sweden that the one on the left does. And that's because the kind of the sensuality of it is somehow not discussed. And that applies also to the way that ancient architecture, there's a big discourse or debate around this at the moment. Ancient architecture tended to be seen as, or tends to be seen as white, pure, kind of sophisticated, intellectual in that whiteness and in that purity. And of course, in the 19th century, it was discovered that most of these ancient monuments, particularly in ancient Greece, were completely painted. And they were incredibly eloquent and expressive in a way that was not about kind of this Platonic idea of the white, simple, bold piece of structure that's been presented consequently. And obviously now there's a lot of argument between people who say white Western architecture is the symbol of our shared culture, and then those who say actually the colorfulness of it is actually symbolic of the multiculturality of the ancient world. This is just a really nice set in Rome on the left in the Cinecittà, which is used for lots of different shows, including the BBC HBO show Rome, which has hints of that pigment, hints, not too much of it. And then on the right is, you can see the kind of, post 18th century expression of classicism as a sort of white, pure, sophisticated and intellectual, which culminated in the sort of 1930s with this very abstracted form of classical architecture in Rome, which has become very fashionable to refer back to, which is of course ignoring of this sort of great polychromatic history. And it's something that, we occasionally have these wonderful revivals, like which is happening at the moment, where color is sort of being rediscovered, but it tends to be momentary. In the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s, there was a kind of period where color and sort of decoration was being re-injected into design and architecture. On the left is a fantastic haul by the brilliant John Outram, who's amazingly on Instagram. You must follow him. He writes essays for each one of his posts. And on the right is sort of more recent project, which in sort of the great tradition of German civic projects took 12 years to build, and they're of similar size. And interestingly, the way that people relate to the one is sort of symbolic of the way that seriousness is seen in architecture. John Outram is a sort of incredibly sophisticated architect who has wonderful narratives and an entire almost theology about his decoration and his color, and yet that was a ridiculed space. And the architecture students who were just around the corner in Rice University were apocryphally banned from ever entering it because it was seen as so dangerous that it might corrupt them. And it's sort of been ignored in the architectural canon, whereas something on the right, similar size, similar scale, white, pure, geometric, in the kind of Ungers tradition, is reverentially referred to as something kind of serious. Just a little bit more on that transition between color in the sort of 1970s and 80s, which is sort of being reintegrated in design, where form has continued through. On the left is a building by Ajmi and Aldo Rossi, more Italians, and on the right is a building with a very similar form in London. It's a beautiful building by David Chipperfield, but you can see that the color has sort of been drained from it over the course of 20 years between the sort of when the one was made and the other was made. And this comes back to the point that it's a very limited definition of what function is. So function tends to be discussed as the kind of performance of a piece, and white tends to be defined as the color of function, because it's seen from, Isabelle brought up Corbusier, but it's been sort of seen as the color of purity and cleanliness as well as intellectual seriousness, since the 1920s or even earlier. But actually function is much more. It's function, and this should be something very relevant for people in the 21st century, in the age of identity politics, that function is also about expression. It's also about meaning. It's about life. It's about joy. It's absolutely, it's very easy to make something work. It's definitely more difficult to make something eloquent and speak. This is something. Thank you. I've got a timer on, but okay. This is something that I've pursued with an artist called Antoni Malinovski for the past 11 years at the Architectural Association. We set up Saturated Space. It's a research group there. We've had 9 symposia with 4 or 5 speakers in each one. We publish lots of texts, and it's trying to look at color as something which is really integral to culture, of design, but also wider culture and how it's expressed in architecture, urbanism, and design. And we've had some really wonderful texts. I would recommend that you visit the website. This Alexandra Lang wrote a fantastic one on the sort of changing gender expression of different colors over the past 100 years. It's quite astonishing how much that has evolved. The color of the internet and the digital, which has obviously had a very transformative effect on how we see color in the real world. That's by Andreas Angelidakis. Hugh Pearman, from the great ex-editor of the RIBA Journal, writing on how the color of cars has actually been a way that the cities have been transformed over different decades. Daniel Paul talking about the history of gold mirrored glass. John McCartin talking about how the expression of elevations treated in different colors has actually mapped the different economic and racial makeups of different cities in the United States, how power is expressed in different ways through different forms of color in different countries, pink being the color of power in Argentina, white being the color of power in the United States. On the left, a fantastic text by Owen Hopkins, who's very much talking about that political debate that is going on between the right wing and the left wing, or progressive classicists and the sort of right wing media over the sort of classical architecture, which is very pertinent in the United States at the moment. And now also on the right, the color of the white has become the color of green as well. White tends to become the color of everything that's seen as very serious at a given moment in time. It's something that has never left. John Outram on the right here again, but color has always been present in architecture, and there's some wonderful architects still operating with it, and more so now with the younger generation. But for instance, Eric Parry is an architect. It's a large architectural practice who've always incorporated quite sophisticated uses of color, very often with ceramics by Darwin here, into their architecture over this sort of the Greige period of the past 20 years. And it's something which has also represented disparate groups within society who don't fit in or are outside the norms. So the book I'm writing with the RIBA at the moment is on queer spaces, and color is, not only for that community, but also for other marginalized groups. Color and ornamentation are an extremely important mode of representation, and pretty much all of the kind of queer spaces that we are looking at in the book very integrally look at color as a mode of identity expression. And it's something that I've written about also journalistically speaking, because I do believe, for instance, especially for queer aesthetics, but also for minority aesthetics, queer is a way of breaking away from the kind of standard norms, that intellectual construct that puts everything good within this sort of one aesthetic category and particular approach. And it's something that I've explored through my work at different scales, either looking at it structurally, this is sort of travertine for vaults, structural vaults, or decoratively, these are rain screens that my students created out of ceramics from scratch that could be put onto building facades. Sculpturally, looking at ceramics, again, this is very important for bathrooms, the history of ceramics in relation to toilets, and that's something that I've kind of explored in relation to color, and do that at sort of every scale of project. Just in terms of personal approach, I think I'm probably maybe have an alignment with Jordan and Russell here, that color for me is very integral to my identity, and it's literally like eating. I have a kind of synesthetic relationship with it. When I go into a really beautiful space, I just taste it. And when I design, I kind of almost feel like I'm putting out an incredible meal, and I'm cooking. And for me, that sort of visceral, sensual relationship with color is really important and personally guides how I relate to it. And for me, it's very important that the clients that I work with and the students that I have and anybody that I'm consulting, sorry, this is me licking a vase, it's from a project that I did, that they find their personal expression through color. And it's not about conforming, because there's that sort of grayish, brown, gray, white aesthetic, which is all about conforming to a norm. And for me, it's really a wonderful opportunity for people to personally find expression of something which is uniquely there. So basically getting really ugly and messy. It's a little bit like my background, which is very ugly and messy. And it's something that I've sort of cultivated through different projects. Okay, that's my time up, so I'm going to go very quickly now. And you know, for me, I bring sort of my queer background and my sort of identity background into it. So this is like, I consider dragging a lot of my work, dragging as an approach to a lot of my work, whether it be little vases that rock and are a little bit cheeky, no, this is not about, I'm not showing bathrooms. There's a kitchen project in Bristol. There's a project in Tokyo that I did. I got little hints of a bathroom here. And I think just from a queer perspective, bathrooms are extremely important, as they were places where you are you're socially forced to engage with your body in a very dictated way. And one nice thing about the way bathrooms have been transforming over the past few decades, yes, they're becoming luxury spaces and items, but they've been also becoming less spaces of conformity and more spaces of individuality, which, at least from the perspective of a queer person, is actually a very powerful and important thing, because it's a place where you engage with your body in the way that you want to engage with it. There's a fantastic history of bathrooms being very unusually constructed within queer communities over the past 30 years. For instance, the breaking down of privacy barriers within other shared communal spaces, which tells a really wonderful and parallel interesting story of bathrooms as spaces of liberation. This project was done specifically with that in mind, this Tokyo apartment, which I sort of imagined as a gay boudoir. And also, color is a way that we connect with history, and we can combine historical references in a very sensual way that's not intellectual, and refer to different cultural backgrounds. So very quickly, I'll go through these slides, but these are different projects where I've referred to a multitude of historical reference, which brings together different cultural backgrounds for myself and for other people in a way that's instantly recognizable, but also really, really approachable and inclusive. And it's something that I've campaigned for in the public realm, looking at ways that larger architecture spaces can become inclusive through color, through decoration, which brings together different cultures. These are just some of my projects that do that in different ways. And I'll flip through them very quickly, and then that's the end. This is a large piece in Croydon that I'm working on, ceramics. If you give me 1 minute, this brings in Jordan and Russell, so who I love. I grew up with changing rooms, which is like heaven. So it was a place where people did up their homes, or they got this team to do up their homes in a sort of dream way that was all about them and what their loves were, and their bizarre ideas that they wanted to live in a Moroccan harem, or they wanted to live in a Roman palace, and their rooms would be done up in the most horrendously bad taste. But they were so wonderful and so personal, and it was all about the home being a mode of expression for yourself. And then, unfortunately, that changed in the early 2000s, and we switched to this Sarah Beanie model, which was all about the home being about capital and about investment, and it was all about the lowest common denominator of what aesthetic is the most universal, so that your home has the most value. And basically, that's grey or white or brown, and that became the kind of dominant mode of home expression, which was money and value, which is very sad. And I'm super excited that Jordan and Russell are coming back to bring some of this wonderfulness back, obviously with better taste, because they have better taste than that. And I'm now working on a lot of interior products. This is some tiles from Bottega Nove, which are just coming out shortly, which can be some rugs for floor story, some handles, some chairs, and some home products that basically operate in the changing rooms mode of designer thinking, which is objects which don't necessarily fit in, but they're effusively expressive in their use of color. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for going over.
Thank you, Adam, for a very interesting presentation. We've got one question so far, but I'll just kick off with a first question. So I'm wondering, this interest in colour, and sort of texture as well. Where did it come from for you? And
sorry, I thought I had to turn it off.
Did you hear my question, Adam?
Sorry, I didn't. If you could.
Oh, that's okay. So I was just wondering sort of where this interest in using colour has come from for you. And I suppose it's worth also sort of adding, why did the Sarah Beanie model last only so long?
So, I mean, my interest in color came from my background. Obviously, personal predilection combined with background and context. So, my family is very, I mean, particularly my mother and my grandmother, they're very colorful. You know, they're immigrants who sort of created their own environment in places which they never really fit into, and a part of that was a kind of very effusive expression of identity through aesthetics, like very strong aesthetics. And then I, you know, sort of growing up as a teenager in London as a queer kid, I was very much present in the sort of gay scene in the 90s, and there was just a lot of visual expression, you know, nightclubs being set up, graphics, protests, which incorporated a lot of visual expression. And so when I went into architecture and they told me that I couldn't do any of that, of course I did it 10 times more. And so it's just something that came from a combination of, you know, things I came across in my background and a deep love, you know, and it was already when I was very young, I was, you know, just doing a lot of colorful drawings. In terms of the Sarah Beanie model, it's not fair to pin it on her, but she's very, you know, she had a very successful pair of shows. I don't think it's gone away. I mean, you know, my brother, when we have family dinners, my brother loves to, and his wife, they love to show me photos of, you know, homes that their friends have done up, and they're, you know, just these incredibly sad minimalist spaces that are in the sort of in that model, in that mode. So I don't think it's gone away. I think it's become actually a very predominant way of designing, the idea that you must not design anything that might be offensive to anyone in case it might have to be sold in some way. It's sort of very much become ingrained, and the idea of personal expression is coming back, but very, very tentatively.
So we've got some comments and questions otherwise as well, actually. There's a comment from Francis McShane who says, great presentation, I'd be terrified to make my buildings so colourful. But it's not just about colour, is it? It's also about sort of gloss and mattness. So do you want to just talk a bit about how that comes into it? I mean, the first time I think I ever saw your ceramics, I was kind of amazed by how glossy they were. How did you do it?
Yeah, you brought this up when we chatted. I absolutely love gloss. And it's partially, I mean, it's partially because I love ceramics and I have a very deep relationship with ceramics. I kind of, they have a sort of mystical quality for me. But there is, you know, as well as a sort of parallel, there is a sort of celebration in architecture and design, this idea of authenticity. Tends to be allied with the idea of a material that's unfinished, you know, that doesn't have a seal. I gave the example of, you know, David Chipperfield in Cafe Royal, who didn't want to seal the stone on the floor there, which obviously is very impractical because then it sort of absorbs everything. But it looks beautiful, and beautiful because we associate it with being authentic. Whereas gloss, which is just as authentic, but it has this sort of specular quality that reflects the light, changes with the, well, it changes with the seasons and the quality of light around you. You can see yourself in it. It's more durable. And I find it just absolutely exquisite on a sort of personal poetic level as well. I associate it with water, with rain, and obviously with ceramics, but I translate that also to when I work with steel and other materials. I think there's a kind of glossiness that speaks about brightness, vibrance, reflectivity, that I very much enjoy. So it's not just a polemic opposition.
So there's a question from James that he has a very specific question about what colour would you recommend to stimulate a small working environment? That's all I'm getting from this question. So I presume in a small sort of office environment, would you particularly think of a certain colour?
I mean, it depends what kind of working environment and what sort of atmosphere you would want to give it. I mean, and also how much light is coming in. So it depends on the quality of light that's coming through. If there's a lot of light, the color can be a lot more bold. It can be a lot more vibrant, because actually most of the time you're seeing the direct sunlight, and the color recedes into the background. If it's quite a dark space and it's lit by artificial light, you can go with much gentler, more pastel tones. But I wouldn't suggest one particular color without being able to see the particularities of that space. But maybe avoid bright yellows, avoid very, very saturated reds, things which are quite intense on the eye all the time if you're going to be working there.
Great, thank you. And I think we'll have a few other questions, but maybe we'll reserve those for the panel discussion where you're rejoining us. And so thank you, Adam. So now just to introduce you to Roberto Palomba. So Palomba, Chief Design Officer at Ideal Standard. So hello, Robert. Are you there? Are you able to speak back? Oh yes, hello.
Here I am. Hello.
Good. So you've designed this latest collection that Ideal Standard, and we just have a sort of few questions to ask you about it. So firstly, just how did you get involved with Ideal Standard, and what's your background? Why did you decide to take on this brief to take on the new Atelier Collection?
My studio is 26 years old, and we had the chance to design almost everything in the house. We also design. We also are architects, and so we have a very strong connection with the human environment, I can say. The bathroom for me was like a sort of a paranoid, an obsession. Because when I started designing houses, the bathroom was very weak, was very beautiful, horrible, I can say. And it was the lost room of the house. And it's such an important place because it's the place where we are alone, basically, when we can close the door, the children can stay out. It's the place where we can relax. It's the place where there's the water, and water is so important for us. It's part of the human body, in percentage of the 80%. So it's the place where it's like our sanctuary. I don't know. It's the place where we recover from everything in the day. And it was basically was made by plumbers, not by architects. There was no design. There was just tools, useful and functions, and sometimes some ugly tiles, pink or blue. That was the situation when I started, but it was not the situation in the beginning, because we had some very interesting samples of beautiful design in the 50s, for example, in the 70s, made by some of the most important designers in this period, like Gio Ponti or Achille Castiglioni, that are two of my main masters. The case was that both these two designers were working for a brand named Ideal Standard. That was the most important brand doing design when the word design perhaps was not invented, and these people was having a vision about society, not just about bathrooms. So when I had the opportunity to be involved in Ideal Standard, for me was a great honor, because it was the opportunity to work for the most important brand introducing design in this world, and bring back the design competence to this great brand, and bring back the what does design means. That is not just creating a nice shape or giving a nice color, but bringing an emotion and creating a complex relationship between the end user and the product itself, the function itself. So this was the reason why I accepted this important role in this important brand. And we are now developing, in the last 3 years, we developed the best part of the strategy, and it seems to be very, very successful, and we are very happy about that. So
it links quite well with Adam's presentation, doesn't it? So in this collection, there are a number of items that are also colourful, for example. And so why why did you decide to bring that part into the concept for the collection, and how did you arrive at that decision, and sort of why now, I suppose?
Well, color was important in the past because I mean, white the total white is an invention of the latest years in the 90s, perhaps, when minimalism became so powerful. But I mean, it's a cycle, you know. After spring comes summer, after summer comes winter, autumn, and so on. So I mean, this moment we are back in color, and perhaps when we will tired of colors, we will go back to white. So it's a cycle. I know, you know, for me, color is like sex. You can have sex with whatever you want, and nobody has to take care about this. The only difference between before and today is that you can do it at the same time with the same people many times. Who cares? That's I mean, is important to understand. Before it was a style. So everything has to be colored. In the 70s, for example, everybody has to use colors. White was completely banned from the production.
So these are some of, on the screen, these are some of the colors that you have in the collection. So do you want to just say what color, how did you choose those colors as part of it?
Because they were the original colors of the collection, or it was the original old colors of the brand. We remanaged them in a contemporary way. We have to reduce the number of the colors, and then we modify them, and we make them matte to bring them a new tactile surface. But as I was telling you, today you can have a color bathroom, or you can have it totally white. Who cares? It's up to you, your choice. Before it was not like this. Before it was in the 90s, if you have a black sink, everybody was shocked because your sink was black. In the 70s, if you have a white toilet, everybody was shocked because the toilet was white. It was not pink or blue or green. So today we are free, and we can naturally, there are trends, and those trends influence the designers' work. So the trend is today is a little bit more colored, tactile, matte, for sure is a trend. Designers are developing nice combination of this, and this is very nice. But it's an evolution.
Is the matte thing, that's part of like sort of surfaces that can still act like kind of glossy surfaces, isn't it? It's part of reinventing the technology behind the surface of the sink too, I think.
Yes, for sure. For sure, we are. You have to. There is in the industry. There is a 360 days a year evolution. So we are evolving the finishing, even the structure of the ceramic, for example, but even the faucets. We are studying new PVD. They are less impacting on the environment. That can give us many opportunities, like black surface or matte gold or other kind of finishing that can be very nice if we mix and match them with the color of the ceramic. And then is another evolution in tiles or finishing. For example, we are using now waterproof wallpapers and so you have to think that the bathroom is an environment. You don't have to, you can't think or design a bathroom thinking only to the ceramics or the faucet or the shower. Every time you are designing an environment. So any component must be in relationship. So sanitary.
In the collection, you've got curves and sort of these square corners, as you can see on the screen. Well, the sort of curved square corners, actually. Do you want to talk a bit about the sort of shapes as well as the materials and the colors that you've already spoken about already?
That's what I was saying before. For example, now in this moment, we are working on a re-edition of very classic vintage design of Ideal Standard. Its name is Scala, that will come next year. The target for me is to design freedom. I mean, today you can have a very squarish basin, super minimalistic, inspired to the Bauhaus collections of the goods, or minimalistic sculpture like Donald Judd, or you can have soft corners and more, let me say, feminine shapes or more rounded. We understand that today is not anymore existing designers. So our target is to give the right tools to designers to design their own space. So it's not my space. I don't want to impose, I want to inspire. That is my target as a designer myself and art director of this brand. It's important that a brand like Ideal Standard is competent and, let me say, democratic in terms of design. We have to try to offer our knowledge and our experience to the designers to use our tools, our products, but to create their own design. This is very important because we respect designers, and we want they feel completely free to invent and to create with our tools.
So you've been working on it for sort of 3 years, you said, and so and the past year has sort of changed everything. So how do you think the pandemic, for example, will change bathroom design, how people use bathrooms even?
I mean, we design for almost like 30 brands, and not only bathroom. Bathroom is, for me, is only Ideal Standard. I'm completely in exclusivity. But we design for the best part of the most important brands in furniture. We design with brands like Poltrona Frau or Cartel. And now we are just started to design the new home collection for Versace brand at this moment. And we saw that the people during the pandemic, they discovered their houses. The people can go out, can meet people outside. They have to stay home. And they discover that perhaps their homes, they need to be a better place to stay. So we are working now 24 hours a day because we are doing a lot of renovations. But at the same time, the people want to have let me say, like a more comfortable sofas, or they want to have a better kitchen to use it with the family, or whatever endeavor. But
I think on the screen you can see some images of how use of bathrooms changed.
They became larger. They became more integrated in the rooms. They became, for example, we are studying what we call the water room as a shower, like a room, not only just an enclosure. We are studying different kind of typology. But the people in the bathroom, they pretend the bathroom became really the body sanctuary. So they are changing this into not into a space but into a place. This is very important. I think this gives a lot of energy. You know, when you have a place where you can recharge yourself, and there is the water, you have the shower, and you have the place where you can have a nice contact with your face. You take care about yourself. This I think is an important part of the house. So the people is discovering this and is giving more space. Sometimes the people start to reduce a little bit more the bedroom and to have a larger space in the bathroom, for example. They can have double basins or things like this. There are a few technical things, but at the same time, these spaces are becoming more important for the better flow of our days. So it's very nice like this.
So I think you're one of as you were kind of mentioning, a long list of designers that Ideal Standard has worked with, and I understand that you're teaming up with them beyond this Atelier Collection. So can you tell us what's next? What are you kind of planning for the future in terms of collections and design?
There will be a lot of new things coming in the next couple of months. I tell you that we create what we call the World Tour. Together World Tour is a group of events, digital events that you can follow on our website, where you will discover in the next month all the new product we were going to launch for this year, and there's something more coming for the next year. Basically, today the standard is made by two main pillars. from one part we have what we call the premium. That is, premium doesn't mean luxury or exclusive. We want our premium to be inclusive and affordable. So premium is an attitude in terms of quality and in terms of culture. It's not just a quality in terms of price. This is very important for us because this brand has a very strong root in terms of social design. And this is Atelier. Atelier is the, let me say, the more design part, the more cultural part. We are working on it to develop it in a very free and different way to be select product and in a different way to be selected. For example, we have like our lines for the basins, and then we have some what we call the basket is the place where you can select all the tools around, so you can really work like an architect design normally is his own design. And then we have the mainstream part where we have a product that they are more useful, they are more, let me say, dedicated to the hardware of the constructions, and this is a very important part. On the other side, we have a part dedicated to hygiene, that is more for hospitals, communities, and so on, and these kind of things. So the brand is very large, it's very complex, and to work for this brand is very complicated somehow, because we have to take care about so many issues every day, and but it's a great emotion, I think, because we have the opportunity to meet the people, to speak to the real problems of the people, and to solve them. It's great.
So I think we have a short video of the collection to present now. So thank you, Roberto, and you'll be joining us as well for the panel discussion in a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Something new under the sun. You can't take back them things you already done. No. You blame things that you do on somebody else. No. But they all see is you need help. But still you try so hard to cover up your games. You try so hard, hoping that one day something gon' change.
So now we move on to the panel discussion, and I have some questions, obviously, but do please continue to send through questions into the chat. And we bring back Roberto and Adam, but also introduce Jordan and Russell from 2LG Studio, Nicholas Desano, and Andrew Stembridge from Iconic Luxury Hotels. So it might be good to just start with one of my own questions for the moment to Andrew. I can see you there. So you work mostly in hotels, a sector that's always involving its bathrooms, if it's a good hotel anyway, I think. And you're involved in the design process. and you've said to me that your focus is on what guests want. And so tell us how bathrooms have evolved in hotels, and what do guests want?
I think in terms of what guests want, it's changed a lot. And whereas I think in the hotel space, you know, bathrooms were purely there as a function. Now, as I think it's been highlighted earlier, they're actually there as a place where people spend more time. And I think people lead such busy lives now, and albeit sort of COVID's changed that somewhat in terms of how much time people spend at home. But I think generally going to a hotel, there's this expectation that in a luxury bathroom anyway, you get the opportunity to spend time, and so we're finding that things like televisions, for example, we'll happily see a TV in a bathroom. We'll if we can bring in natural daylight, whereas often bathrooms used to be sort of hidden away in a central space, and even down to we've got two extremes. For example, our tree houses at Chewton Glen and the Mayfair Townhouse in London, whereas at Chewton Glen in the tree houses, we've actually got windows which aren't they're not frosted or covered in any way, so that people can actually enjoy their bathroom and enjoy the views and looking out into the trees. So I think there's a bit of that outside in, and I think I think the other thing that's changed for us is I think it's designing bathrooms taking the same principles you would in a bedroom. So actually, it's those layers that you bring in. Lighting design in bathrooms is really important, and that ability to create mood. So you want to be able to have great light for shaving and makeup and the like. So really good, strong, well-placed directional lighting and mirrors. But also then you want the ability to take the lighting down and actually make it a relaxing, calm, romantic space. And so I think it's that almost multifunctional element to it, rather than before where it was just purely just functional, i.e. there for washing and so I there's a number of things. And I think the other thing as well as obviously speccing and choosing really good sanitary ware and brassware, it's actually those design layers of and accessorizing as well, which bring in it's been fascinating hearing about color. And I say in a way I'm challenged with that somewhat, because ultimately when we I think more and more we're investing more in bathrooms, but with a view to actually a bathroom probably will live through probably two or three bedroom refurbishments. So actually that creating that sort of longevity of design, so it's timeless to a certain extent, but actually we do want the bathrooms to be memorable and Instagrammable, and actually we want them to feature when people are sharing their stories about their stays. We want the bathrooms to feature in that, so that it's quite interesting actually.
Thank you. And so, Nicola, I think you have a project that sounds like you use quite a few of the same ingredients as Andrew. So layering, you mentioned to me, lighting. Tell us about this Cadogan Square project that you worked on. It's in a listed building, and I think Andrew actually told me previously that he's got hotel bedrooms where they have 2 bathrooms, but this is another 2-bathroom ensuite, isn't it?
That's right. But I can see some common threads with what Andrew discussed. But just to give a background, as you mentioned, yes, our practice mostly works with London period properties, and I think that in itself begins to create a dialogue, which is, I think, unique, not in its sense, but a dialogue which is unique to these homes. And so these bathrooms, especially in this property we looked at, Cadogan Square, it's listed. And by being listed itself, and also by wanting to maintain the London period identity, which I find it's quite stimulating and unique, in a way, it begins a dialogue that we can have with clients, that although they can express their creativity in the choice of colors, the choice of tiles and marbles, there's always a framework behind. And I think in line with what Andrew discussed is that there is a theme that starts to be established, which is a connectivity to the bedroom. Because when we think about bathrooms in period homes, we think of bedrooms. Bathrooms didn't exist as we know them today. And interestingly enough, if we start looking at bathrooms as bedrooms, or if we start looking at the bathroom from outside and bringing the bedroom inside the bathroom, a framework of design starts to be established. So to give you an instance, we looked at, sometimes we keep cornices or we keep window architraves. And just by doing that, you suddenly, by keeping a cornice, you bring plaster. When you bring plaster, you bring a wall surface. So when you bring a wall surface, you're already starting thinking of colors. So the walls are painted in the bedrooms, or wallpapers that you potentially could begin. Also, you think about datums. What is the relationship between the marbles or the wall linings against the plasterwork? So typically, sometimes we form datums like data rails or picture rails, but also thinking about windows expressing joinery. So what is the color of joinery? So we look at how we color the joinery in the rest of the house. So those colors start to come into the bathroom. So interesting enough, the bathroom becomes more similar to the bedroom. Materials such as timber sometimes come in. And quite interesting, it's also that relationship with the bedroom that is created by keeping a visual connection. So we, in Cadogan Stair, for instance, we try to make that, although working within the restriction of the listed building, we always try to create the openings as big as possible between the bedroom and the bathroom. So they were able to insert sliding doors, and those sliding doors then, and arrangements also of the bathrooms are beginning to understand accesses that are formed between the front windows in the main rooms back to the bathrooms. So in that instance, for that bathroom, we spent a lot of time, a lot of iterations, and it's been sort of a juggle between client expectations, but also working with the listed building. But yeah, I think
it uses marble and timber, doesn't it?
It does.
Quite considerably, and also sort of mirrors as well.
It's right. So in that instance, because we were establishing a relationship with the main bedroom, which has to do with establishing axis of views, which would align the windows. And so in that case, we ended up putting the vanity right in front of a window. So when you walk in, you'd be staring right at the vanity and the mirrors. And there we actually managed to find a technical solution where we would still maintain the classical backdrop of the historic windows behind a new veil that we created by scribing essentially a picture rail datum for the marble, which as a bar, it floated over the window. And the mirrors themselves were also placed in front of these windows, which are sash windows that need to be opened. But we then established a method to slide them on rails. And then last thing, again, what Andrew discussed is lighting. And I think lighting is essential in bathrooms. It's always about being able to have mood setting lighting so that you could keep the doors open and the bathroom then feels like your bedroom. So
I think these are kind of tools that Russell and Jordan also use at Studio 2LG, but they have kind of quite different effects. But I know they speak about vistas and also sort of social media design as well. But funny enough, they're actually both actors, so this is their second career, which I think is fascinating. And they describe their work as joyful minimalism. But I mean, it uses many of the same layering techniques. But tell us what that is and why it's quite so different.
I think, I mean, it's been so interesting hearing about Adam's perspective on queerness within his use of colour and the way that he works. And I feel inherently, as queer people, that we have had to find a way in this world to make ourselves feel free and feel able to express ourselves, because the world wasn't built necessarily for us. And so using colour has felt like a way to kind of crash through some boundaries, perhaps. And even the rainbow itself, which is seen as a kind of queer symbol, is evolving and is used as a way to kind of express our voice. And So for us, we like to build a through line of colour. We like to sort of give ourselves the opportunity to create some drama in a space with colour. And sometimes, as you say, that can be the layering. And part of my professional training was singing. And actually, you can't hit a top note and sustain a really beautiful sound unless you're engaging all of the muscles of the body. So perhaps the colours that you use in a hallway leading to your explosion of colour that maybe is happening in the bathroom, we will layer, you know, the colours in that support the moment that's going to happen later on the journey through the home. So sometimes a through line palette of colour.
Also patterns as well, isn't it? In your particular work.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of try to use colours and patterns, matte and gloss as well, different textures as sort of architectural parts of a space rather than decorative additions, definitely. And we feel very strongly that, you know, the joyful minimalism side of what we're progressing at the moment with our design work is it's about building a really strong structure base framework so that we can play within it with colour.
So your Hither Green project is that uses kind of electric blue and bubblegum pink. And I've got a question from Mike who says, well, his question is really about how the colour can be very personal, but how do you manage it around commissioning a client?
I think we always aim to push our clients outside of their comfort zone. They may come to us with a sort of preconceived idea of how they want something to look or sort of feel. And it's our job, I think, as is all of our jobs, to sort of make them think outside the box a bit, whether that's with colour or material. But colour is definitely something that's very instinctive to us, and it's a core part of what we do.
I also think a lot of it's about building the client's confidence and partly giving the client permission to allow themselves to go there. And so many of the barriers that we have to break down when we're working with a client are about whether it's going to add value to the property, which Adam touched on again, because there's this obsession, certainly in the UK, that, you know, bricks and mortar have value and we mustn't damage that. And we have to break that barrier down and sort of build the client's confidence that this is going to add value to their lived experience, and that has weight, and that's important. And also, I do believe that social media over the last 5 years has allowed people to gain confidence, because liking a really vibrant, colourful picture of an interior is risk-free, it's consequence-free. And as people have developed their confidence looking and curating their own feeds and enjoying colour, it's started to permeate their own lives, and they feel more confident to actually make big, bold decisions in their bathrooms, for example.
Because you also described that bathroom as for a morning person, a morning client. Yeah. So what would be the sort of opposite bathroom for a more evening client?
Funny enough, it's one of the first things we ask the client when we come to design a bathroom is how do you use the space and when do you use the space? Because I think you want to feel a certain way in the morning and the evening, and that differs, you know, from client to client.
Yeah, so
those people get up at 6 a.m. and go on a run, I think.
Yeah, that particular client, a very energetic couple, they're climbers, and so it was about giving them an energizing moment in the morning, a vibrant, bold wake up that made them feel good and want them to want to take on the day. And perhaps our own bathroom is a really good example of an evening space, because for you, the bathroom is a kind of sanctuary to relax in, have a bath. I'm more of a shower person, and you're definitely a bath person, but we've got a really soft matte pink tile in our bathroom, and it is a calming space for us.
So Adam, I have a question for you about colours in nature. Have birds and flowers, I'm not quite sure where that comes from exactly, inspired you in any way?
Yes. And I think it's the same. Russell and Jordan always share lovely photos of their garden, and I think it's probably similar for them, if I'm being presumptuous.
Yeah, but I was also wondering, when I look at your Tokyo project, for instance, there's kind of an austerity to it and a kind of economicalness, even though it is sort of, you know, injected with colour. Are there other emotions going on there? Is there sort of a bleakness that can be associated with colour as well?
It's interesting because the comments I normally get are people saying they want to claw their eyes out when they look at it.
Oh, I think we've lost you on the mic, so you've just gone on to mute.
I just went on to mute, sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know how that happened. But yeah, it's, no, I mean, bleak is not really, the atmosphere that comes across when you're in it is actually sort of something that I strive towards, which is rather than, I mean, you know, I sort of advocate for expression and exuberance, but I think like Russell and Jordan, I do in my own work, you know, my public work is much more exuberant, but when I'm doing domestic interiors or interior spaces, I do try and construct a very coherent and harmonious atmosphere, which does have its own logic and its own set of proportions and its own color balances. And actually there are moments of interest, beautiful textures, beautiful detailing, but that actually overall it's not overwhelming, and it's more it doesn't impose on you at every moment, and that's the intention generally when I approach interiors.
And we've got a question from Tom Russell. So he says, colour and fashion should be used carefully in recognition of design life and recyclability of the materials. Ceramics last thousands of years, but are often discarded on a whim. I think that could be directed actually to Andrew. So in terms of sustainability, your hotels are kind of a mix of new builds and conversions. What are you doing to kind of tackle those issues in the bathroom?
I think it's a real dilemma for us, because at one end, you know, we are luxury properties and people are paying a lot to come and stay with us, and therefore this sort of idea of indulgence, we have to be able to deliver that. So I think for us, it's not compromising the luxury side of it, but it's where we can, you know, obviously we use water saving WCs, showers, taps, wherever possible, so that we're still, I mean, obviously the bathtubs are a big dilemma, because ultimately they use a lot of water, and without reducing the size of that, it's very hard to deal with that. But I think, you know, we have a responsibility to spec water saving brassware if we can, and then I think a lot of it goes into the accessories as well. It's, you know, how we, you know, they're using either organic cotton toweling or bamboo toweling, or some of the modern other modern fabrics which are actually dry. You know, most hotel toweling goes through industrial laundry, so it's how quickly it dries. Bringing in, you know, making sure the amenities we provide in the rooms, again, they're organic, and you know, obviously COVID's thrown things back by a couple of years in terms of everyone was starting to move away from silly little single-use plastic bottles into larger format bottles. And again, there's always that dilemma of hygiene and practicality. And so you know, so there's definitely a desire from our perspective to do move that way. But I think it's that sort of fine line of, as I say, new sort of COVID restrictions and hygiene.
But, I mean, you mentioned already how actually the redesign of the bedrooms happens more frequently than the bathroom, for instance. Yeah,
they do, and they definitely have to have a longer shelf life. And I think in a way, you know, ultimately people's bedrooms and bathrooms in a hotel have to be better now than they have at home. And I think that's a really tall order, because most people's homes are far more stylish and designed than they used to be. So we need to kind of keep one step ahead of that. There does have to be an element of neutrality in terms of, actually, it needs to have a fairly wide appeal without being vanilla and without being dull. Nicola's point actually about this sort of this period, and that's the one thing I really struggle with, is people bring ultra modern bathrooms into sort of period properties. Sometimes it can work, and I think that's probably the art of good design. And I think sometimes it feels so incongruous, and I think that whole, you know, you know, where we're lucky, all our hotels have a heritage. They all have the ability to you know, bring what was probably an old house or houses or something to life. So it's, you know, it's very rare. I mean, for us, the tree houses are probably one of the few things we've actually built from scratch, and therefore actually we built it around nature. you know, some of the things we mentioned before, we built that around it being curved and actually much more organic feel to the spaces. But on the whole, we're working with buildings, as I say, which have heritage, and therefore we try and we try and tease that out without them being too traditional. But it is I think it's all, I suppose design it shouldn't be about compromise, but I suppose there is an element of actually having to make sure that what we do has longevity, and it's not going to look dated in a couple of years. And I think the last thing is it's actually that practicality, and I think that's the one thing which, again, hotels often get it wrong in terms of actually having, it is those silly little details like, that the hook by the shower, and all those sort of finer details and clever details which designers bring in are so key, because actually they make it, they actually, they might not add to the initial wow factor, but they add to the overall experience of feeling, and almost this sort of calm of actually everything's being thought through and everything's in the right place. And whether it's even somewhere for a glass of wine, while you're lying in the tub, and those types of things, it's there's nothing worse than having to sort of jump across the room to to grab your book, or it's all those. It's a combination of so many things.
Can I just quickly add that I think one of the most popular Instagram posts that I ever made was just a statement, because I was very angry, that there's a special place in hell for architects who don't specify hooks in toilets.
I also wanted to add about the colour. I love that, but I feel like perhaps the problem is not colour, the problem is actually trends. And if you build colour into your life that you love, it's not going to go out of fashion. And you could level issues at fashion and fast fashion, and the colour is throwaway, but I think we need to change the dialogue around colour. It's not throwaway. Colour can be for keeps. It can be classic. And if it's something that you're passionate about, then it's going to work for you in the long term.
Yeah, I think trends is a real problem, actually. I think it should be a perpetual option available for people to be able to have and stick to. I mean, my grandmother's best friend, everything was purple leopard print. It was like a very specific thing for her whole life, and she died at 99. But it would be it'd be really fantastic if it wasn't just like every 5 years some color comes in, people get it, then they get rid of it when it goes out of fashion again.
So I think, Roberto, I just want to ask, has sustainability and longevity been part of this collection's design as well, that thinking behind that?
The problem of sustainability is basically part of the production, I think, more than the life of the product. Then when you are able to create a good product that can resist for many years, well, longevity can be helpful in sustainability. That's what when I speak that when I say that it's not a matter of shape, but it's a matter of giving the right values to a nice product. We have to, when we design, we have to consider many different options. For example, now in this moment we are studying a different kind of ceramic that can reduce the quantity of raw material that we use, reducing the volume and consequently the quantity of energy that we need to produce, the water that we have to waste to produce it. And when you think that we normally reproduce a product in hundreds of thousands of pieces, that you can imagine how much material, how much energy, how much water we save to produce them. So this is important as much as the product. You have to think, for example, in ceramic, we can recycle the same ceramic. So we crush it, and then we use part of these ceramics to produce other ceramics. So we basically recycle in a different way, but we can use to produce other ceramic. So
yeah, I think
this is part of an industrial process.
Yeah. I think there are all sorts of interesting ceramic studios that are working with recycled materials and producing bricks and new tiles and things like that as well. So I guess this is something that's just going to keep progressing. Nicola, I have a question from Michelle that I think is useful for you. She's wondering whether any of the speakers, and I think for you, designed a bathroom for clients with accessibility needs, and how those can be kind of catered for while maintaining a beautiful space that people want to spend time in.
Yeah, for me, that's a difficult question, because I haven't yet, for a private client, designed a bathroom which is accessible. So accessibility, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it hasn't become something I had to tackle. So this is.
But I think your spaces, you know, they lend themselves quite well to, as you said, these sort of opening vistas, which are, I think, double doors into a bathroom rather than a single door. And that you've kind of done those kind of opening up.
Correct. So we can take accessibility then to the discussion where the bathroom is ergonomic, in the sense it's a space where our clients will feel at ease. For instance, many of our showers are walk-in showers. The idea that you could just step in and step out without having a threshold. Using benches in showers has become a bit of a theme. So typically when we have the space, we always prepare a seat. It's about getting that seat and also arranging the sanitary ware and the brassware, such as that you have two showers. One shower is very close to the seat, so you can clean your feet. And the other one is from the ceiling, so you're standing. So I think, in a sense, yes, in that theme, that working with private clients where spaces are large and the funds are available, there is ergonomics and that form of accessibility becomes part of our designs, and I think that there's a good palette to work with.
I think Andrew has something to add, doesn't he?
Yeah, we've had good experience of this, and I've you know, going back probably 20 years ago, you know, accessible bathrooms in hotels were very utilitarian, and all the grab handles and bars and were tended to be white plastic, and now not everything has to be chrome. We've got one example of a bathroom at Chewton Glen, which actually is now 10 years old, and the room is one of our most popular rooms in the hotel. And I've had, again, in previous lives, you know, had a situation where people would check out of people would check out of an accessible room because of the bathroom. So, you know, and so I think what's available on the market now is incredible. And it is, you know, as Nicola said, you know, it's very easy to create wet rooms with no thresholds and clever drainage. It's about having, you know, vanities which are just a little bit, you know, different height, or even vanities which can go up and down. You know, it's you know, I think one of the future of the bathrooms is almost this ability to actually adjust them to people's specs. I think that's definitely the way they're going to go. But I think, as I say, we've had good experience of making them just as special, with just a little bit more thought about the heights of and actually sinking the tub down so you can actually sit on the side and turn around rather than and so it's and also, you know, certainly in our environment, it's having some of the grab handles which are actually removable as well. So again, you can introduce more or less depending on the needs of the individual client.
So I think we've kind of gone over time now, but to round up, I sort of want to ask one more question, sort of coming back to where we began, I suppose, with colour, and it's to Russell and Jordan actually. And you've had a mint green phase and a lilac phase, let's say. So in terms of colour, what's next for you? What are you working on now?
Well, interestingly, we did a red bathroom, deep red, and it was sort of inspired by Dario Argento's Suspiria, but we did it a few years ago, and perhaps the world wasn't ready for it. But we're having a bit of a red moment at the moment, aren't we?
And chartreuse, we're working on something chartreuse at the minute, which is sort of that sickly lime colour that not many people tend to like, but we're kind of having a love affair with it. So.
Great. Well, I think actually the the bathroom on the front of the delegates pack is red, so that's quite fitting. So thank you to everyone who's spoken today, and I hope that the audience have had some inspiration about how to begin their next bathroom project. That brings today's events to a close. So thank you to Adam, Roberto, Russell, Jordan, Nicolo, and Andrew, as well as our partners, Ideal Standard, and to our audience. We'll be posting the recording later on RIBAJ.com, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Great, thank you.